Hello, everybody, and welcome to this episode of Mastering Midlife: How to Thrive When the World Asks the Most of You. I was listening to my new wonderful radio station, Jennifer Hudson Radio, where Alicia Keys and Mary J. Blige and Whitney Houston and Mariah Carey all come on the station for me to have an awesome time with. And over, Whitney Houston keeps coming on the station, and a lot of the songs are from her last album. And if you remember her last album, her voice was much more husky, and people were a little shocked and probably a little distraught at what had happened to that crystal clear, beautiful voice. And it got some good critical reviews. I remember some people saying it was more accessible, a little grittier, but a lot of people just kind of panned it as shouldn't have been to destroy the legacy. So listening this morning, I'm in love with that album. That album is so good and so underrated. If you have the opportunity to listen, you'll hear something very different. And what I realized this morning was I talk a lot about Michael Jordan and his three stages of his career and how he had to evolve and how he had to change. I talk about Barbara Streisand, how she moved through her career and had to have different styles over the decades. Cher has evolved over and over and over again. I talk about different athletes and how they have to reinvent themselves from raw talent to superstars to legacies. And I realized that Whitney Houston didn't survive her midlife crisis. Uh, and I get a little emotional about it. It's funny because when Whitney was alive, I liked her. I loved her, great voice, but I wasn't a fan. And when she died, I cried. I cried for an entire day. I don't know why. And now I'm all emotional now thinking about Whitney Houston. And I think a lot of it has to do with, when you see behind the mask and you see the pain of someone. So when I think about Whitney Houston, I think about her early career. She was shaped, she was formed, she was told what to sing, she was told how to sing, and she was packaged for an audience. In fact, she was so packaged for the white audience that when she performed at the Soul Train Awards, she was booed. She's not one of us. She eventually won everybody over, of course, but she was, really put into a box, and it wasn't who she was. She grew up, in a gritty, real way, and they put her in this gilded cage. And then after her marriage to Bobby Brown and the drugs and the spectacle and the drama of all of that, her rebelling. And I would say that was her midlife crisis, was her rebelling against being put in a box. What was working didn't work for her anymore. Her soul needed to come out, and it just didn't come out in a healthy way. It came out in a bastardized way, which happens to so many of us. And we all watched it in real time in horror, and the toll it took on her daughter and the rest of her family. Um, Again, I'm a little emotional talking about this. This is really weird. Um, so Whitney goes through this, and she loses her voice. She went through the Renaissance. She was a movie star. Hit song after hit song. Incomparable in that box. And I remember during that time that she was with Bobby Brown, I remember seeing an interview with her, and she put out the album Heartbreak Hotel, which is my favorite album of hers. It's really gritty. It's very soulful. It's much more raw and real. And I remember her doing an interview saying that all these critics of her saying she couldn't sing black music, she couldn't sing real soul. She says, I'm going to show them. And I remember her defiance and her fire and her anger at being criticized. And she did. I mean, that album is so good and so real. Uh, and uh, and then, of course, the downward spiral of addiction and self-loathing, which Kevin Costner talked about so eloquently in her eulogy when she was on the set of The Bodyguard, and how she just wanted to get it right for everybody, and how she cried when she thought she didn't get it right. Again, what a precious soul. So we fast forward to this last album coming out and all the news reports of Whitney coming through, leaving Bobby Brown, coming through, somehow getting clean and sober. You can never really believe the news reports. But she was working with a vocal coach. She looked great. She was going to go to these parties, and she was going to come back out in a renaissance. And this album came out, and again, in hindsight, it was jarring to hear the voice ruined, so to speak. And in now, in with a little distance, how gorgeous that husky voice that's been through life is, and how real and gritty she is. And then she died. The midlife crisis, the drugs, the alcohol, the toll that it took on her body. I don't know whether she took her own life that night or not. Whatever the gravitational pull of that was, didn't allow her to move on. And I started to think, wow. And I heard her vocal coach saying that after that album, her voice started to come back. She was able to hit notes. And I wonder, had she survived her midlife crisis, what would be her legacy now? What would we be hearing from her? What wisdom would she be imparting to younger people? What would have happened with her daughter instead of dying? Would she have had a renaissance herself? And these are questions that won't be able to be answered because she didn't make it through the midlife crisis. I joke with my son all the time. You can go make mistakes, just don't make life-changing mistakes. Don't make life-shattering mistakes. There are dumb mistakes, and then there are life-altering mistakes that you can't come back from. And it looks like Whitney did that. So, what is my point of all this? I talk a lot about people changing and evolving in their careers. We talk about midlife crisis. I believe that it's not inevitable. I believe it's a function of not evolving. I believe Whitney Houston wanted to evolve, and she just didn't have a healthy way to do it. She didn't have the right support system to go inside and to come back out the other side. Often you'll hear artists come out with albums that nobody likes, but it's the album they needed to make, they wanted to make, they listened to their soul. I've been mad at Winona Judd for years for not just continuing singing songs like the Judds and just singing what she wants to sing. Little secret about me. So midlife crisis, midlife, it's the time to take stock. And if you have the tools, if you have the support system, if you really keep putting one foot in front of the other and trust, you can make an album like Whitney made and maybe come out the other side and see what that next chapter can be. Can you go from superstar to legend in that next part of your life if you just keep trudging the road, keep looking inside, keep being true to yourself, and really be surrounded by people? Um, I wonder if I could have helped Whitney Houston if I was in her life. And that's why I do this every day, all day, with people in my life who God brings to me so that I can hopefully help them in their renaissance instead of a midlife crisis, make it a midlife renaissance. So that's what I wish for you today. Pen and paper, good support system, read really good things, contemplate, walk a lot, and listen to Whitney Houston's last album. You'll hear something really special. I love you guys so much. Have a great rest of the day.